Thanks for joining us on CBS News Colorado. I'm Kelly Worthman. Your investigative reporter, Brian Maass, uncovered a mayor in a small town that sold at least 2 cars owned by taxpayers to his daughter, well below market price. The mayor's daughter then apparently flipped them for a profit, and some question whether those sales were fair. Well, now the Jefferson County District Attorney is considering investigating some apparent family wheeling and dealing. Now, this happened in the town of Lakeside, which is home of the amusement park just west of Denver. Your investigator Brian Maass here with us. So Brian, what prompted the DA to look into this?
What they said is that after our initial report on Lakeside and what was going on there with the mayor, his family, his daughter, and all these vehicles, they say they got a number of requests from the public and that they wanted to take a look into what we found.
Lakeside's town clerk, Brenda Hamilton, was not eager to answer our questions.
Have a nice day.
And when she did, there was a lot she didn't remember.
I don't know the name and I don't know where I sold it.
We found cases where her father, the town's mayor and police chief, Bob Gordinaire, signed off on selling 2 town-owned vehicles to his daughter at a fraction of their market value.
Does that sound like a sweetheart deal to you?
It sounds like it to me, yeah.
Don't you think if you sold those on the open market?
You've probably gotten more money for them, or...
Right.
Right.
And in both cases, documents show Gordinaire's daughter, Hamilton, later sold those cars apparently at a big profit.
How do you get a car from this town for $1,000 and then you resell it for so much more?
I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
While the mayor did not dispute any facts when we initially talked to him, in an email to the police department following our report, he wrote, "I want to assure you all that no intent of misconduct was conducted by any employee of the town." He went on to say there were misinformed allegations, but he and his lawyers have declined to share any specifics with CBS News Colorado.
Lakeside is corrupt.
Still, a couple of activists showed up at Lakeside's municipal offices following the news report with tongue-in-cheek signs about the sale of town vehicles and asking for accountability.
I mean, technically, that's what you should do with government property, is at least auction it off to the highest bidder, so you can get the best return on investment.
Steve Berlanga, a former Lakeside police officer, said he was not surprised about the controversy.
She's the chief's daughter, so she believes she could do everything she wants to.
A spokesperson for the Jefferson County DA said after several public requests for an investigation, "We are considering the request and discussing potential next steps."
Now the town of Lakeside says it has hired an outside investigative firm to look into the issues we uncovered. The town attorney says he can't comment beyond that at this point in time, but this is obviously a big deal in Lakeside and beyond that too, because you're talking about some principles about good government, about insider trading, so it extends beyond Lakeside.
Well, and there's a lot of interest in this. I mean, we've been seeing it here in the newsroom, certainly on online, and so we want to really be transparent and take viewers behind the story. So tell us, Brian, how did the story come to be? Like, what was the process?
Well, it's interesting because a few months ago, I got a tip from a longtime news source about this with some sort of vague outlines of what might be going on that I should take a look at in Lakeside. And I did some initial work at that point in time, but there was nothing that was really actionable, nothing that I could really go out on. Then I got some more detailed information from a news source probably about a month and a half ago, and that had a number of allegations in it, and I started to look into all of them, and the one that I felt like I could really either find a paper trail on or verify was this issue about these vehicles. There were some employees of the town who were saying that, you know, we'd get these cars and then they just disappear. I mean, within weeks or months after we got them. So that was a matter of filing Open Records Act requests with Lakeside. It was a matter of getting VIN numbers on cars and tracking down these vehicles and trying to figure out where they were, who owned them, who sold them, and that it really opened up a whole Pandora's box about what was going on out there.
Well, sure, and you ask a lot of important questions, and you've confronted people, as we saw in your stories. I mean, what is that like as well? I mean, I imagine some people clearly don't want to answer your questions, but when you're doing that, you know, how does that work?
Well, I think it was pretty apparent that Brenda Hamilton, the town clerk, the daughter of the mayor, clearly did not want to answer our questions. And when she did answer, she said, "I don't remember," or "I don't know what you're talking about." So that was That was an impromptu meeting that we had out there in Lakeside. We went out there one day to see if she was around. She answered the door, and I did try to talk to her, as you see, and she just kind of moved off and went behind a door and talked to me for a few minutes from behind the door, sort of answering questions, but not really. I did also go out there on another night. There was supposed to be a town council meeting that I was going to, and I was going to try to ask some questions or see what was going on. And what turned out is that the council meeting was canceled, but that Mayor Gordinaire was still kind of hanging around where that meeting was supposed to be. So it was kind of like, aha, okay, well, there you are. So I walked up to him and kind of sat down in his office, and he knew what I was working on. This is not a secret. They know what I'm doing.
Sure.
And then I proceeded to talk to him for about 20 minutes using my cell phone to record the conversation he was doing. And it was interesting because you saw what I think were some very frank, honest answers.
Right. I was going to say he seemed to be much more willing to, think about what he wanted to say, but at least be honest with you or be forthcoming, by answering your questions. I mean, clearly that interview was a little more impromptu. Did you have a plan, though, if he wasn't there, of how you were planning to approach him?
I had certainly thought about what questions I might ask him if I did encounter him, but I hadn't really planned to necessarily see him that evening. But he did seem to be pretty frank and forthright with me about answering these questions, and it was fascinating to me because I did have all the documents with me. So I showed him these bills of sale, and I said, "Isn't that your signature on the bill of sale?" And he'd look at it, he'd say, "Yeah, it is," but and this was really threw me for a loop. He said, "But I just signed the bill of sale." He said, "Somebody else filled out all the information and the cost of the cars," and he basically concluded, well, it must have been his daughter who filled that out. So it got more and more interesting, but I did feel like he was pretty honest. When I asked him, I said, well, shouldn't you have sold these cars on the open market where you get top dollar? He said, well, yeah, probably, but he said it was so much easier just to sell them to my daughter and not have to advertise them and go through all the headaches that you go through in selling a car. But you have to, what we have to do is look out for the interests of the taxpayers and the public.
Right.
They want the most money for those vehicles. They don't want the best deal for a family member.
Right. What feedback have you received from the public, speaking, of which, regarding this story, and what other questions they might want answered?
It's interesting. I've heard from a lot of people associated with Lakeside who kind of said a report like this was long overdue. People out there seem to have a feeling that there are some things going on within municipal government that weren't right and weren't appropriate, and they seem really pleased that we're looking into this. And then, of course, what you get with that is they say, and as long as you're looking at this, here's what else you should look at. So they pile on the work for me. Yeah,
well, it's nice to get more sources, I suppose you could say, in that way. You had an almost immediate update, though, because of your original story, because of this reporting. And it led to the DA, I guess, also hearing requests from the public to look into this. Have you been able to hear more from the DA about this potential investigation? I mean, have they told you anything?
Last week, they said that they were looking at this idea of possibly stepping in and investigating. They were evaluating their options, but nothing firm from them, and I'm certainly following up on them. They said they might have something to say sometime this week, so we'll certainly be checking back with them and seeing if the DA decides to do anything about Lakeside and take a closer look at what's going on there. They, of course, have powers that we don't have to get documents, to talk to people, to really dig into things. We're sometimes held hostage by the Open Records Act request, which is pretty limited, and we can get things that are public records. And what's interesting, too, is in this case, some of the things we asked for under Colorado's Open Records Act statute, we asked Lakeside a month and a half ago. They still haven't produced.
Really?
And they have a very limited time in which they're supposed to either produce these things or say why they can't. And some of those things are very public records, like bills of sale for vehicles, transactions, things like that. I was able to get those through other sources and other ways.
Right.
But they know that they have not even supplied the most basic public records that we've requested.
So more to be done here. More to come from you on this.
Yeah, I think the people of Lakeside and the public needs answers about good government, about if this was proper, if this was improper or not.
Right.
We did hear from attorneys for Mayor Gordinaire and his daughter, and they said, well, there's some things you don't know, and there may be inaccuracies. We said, tell us what they are.
Right.
And they said, well, there's an investigation going on, so we can't tell you what the issues are. So, you know, our hands are kind of tied when somebody says that, because we'd love to know what they have that they might want to share with us.
Well, we'll see what happens next, Brian. Thanks for staying on top of it. And thank you for joining us for your reporter inside the story here on CBS News Colorado. To see more of Brian's reports, head to cbscolorado.com.